Hey guys, this is Alex from Freedom Trading, and in this video I'm going to be giving a brief overview of what happened in my first live account. So I opened this account approximately 9 months after I began studying, and looking back now, even though the account was a pretty huge success overall, I do think that I opened this a little bit too quickly. And the reason for that was because I got an offer from a friend of mine that I thought was just too good to pass up. So what happened was, as I got deeper and deeper into the studying and started, really leaning towards wanting to open an account, I looked around in my local friends to try and see if I could find somebody who was involved and profitable with trading. And as it turns out, I did find somebody. And for the rest of this video, we're going to be calling him John. He had requested early on that I protect his identity, and that arrangement has yet to fade. So for the rest of this video, he will be John. So in the early 2000s, I was really finding a lot of success in the poker world. And one of the first things I did with my gains was I started putting all of my friends into more expensive tournaments to give them a shot to reach the pro level. And so John was one of the people who really parlayed those chances that I was giving out into a substantial bankroll, and he turned out to be a pretty good player. Now fast forward to 2016, where we reconnected, and it turned out that he had spent the last 10 years not playing poker but day trading stocks. And he had had a lot of success, and because of this and because of my situation, we quickly rekindled our relationship, and he started becoming sort of a mentor figure to me, the same as I had been for him in poker 10 years earlier. Now, shortly after we started developing this relationship, I expressed my intent to open a live account to him. And at that time, I was pretty financially strapped. I wasn't exactly in desperation mode, but I had spent a great deal of my savings paying for my living expenses while I studied day trading on a full-time basis. And so coming into 2016, I didn't have a whole lot left over. But the key obstacle here was the fact that I couldn't prove my identity on an international scale. I had recently lost a whole bunch of my ID, and because of where I live, it's almost impossible to get it all back if you lose it all at once, which is exactly what I did. And time pressure was really intense at that time. I wanted to get involved, I wanted to test my skills, and I wanted to see if my simulator results were really a true reflection of what I could do in a live account. And I'll spare you all the details about the other problems. For instance, I didn't have hardware, I didn't have, this, that, and the other, I didn't have tools, and a couple of other things. And so after a couple of ideas of, hey, do you want to maybe put in some money and I'll put in 800 or whatever, and then together we'll launch this account, he ended up counter offering to just pay the entire thing. He said, you're cash strapped, I totally understand. Keep what you have, keep 100% of your money. I'll put up your stake and then we'll split it 50-50 just like we would have back in the day with poker. And so the deal going into this was that he would provide me with $1,600 US of trading capital. I would be able to use my account through his platform. And then if I lost, he would absorb the loss. But if I won, then we would remove the initial $1,600 from the total and we would split any gains after that 50-50. Now, even though the setup itself and the financial aspects were all amazing, what I had to go through in the first couple of months of this arrangement was very difficult. And the critical detail is that I was trading over the phone. Take a minute to absorb that if you're, somebody who day trades now, to just realize how crazy that is. And the setup we had was that he would give me a call when, he wasn't overly involved in any big cap movement. And so he would call me up and say, hey, do you want to go? And so what we would do is I would be at my place using free charting software and Yahoo Finance. And then I would tell him what I had in mind in the setup and what I wanted him to do. And then he would do it. Now, I can't seem to try and explain why this is without going on like an 8-minute tangent. So I'm going to skip all those reasons and you'll just accept that we traded over the phone. And this was the arrangement that we had for about the first 2 months of this account. Now, going into the account, my goal was very simple. It was get that $1,600 back and take it out. I wanted to absolutely just break even, get his money back so that I didn't ever have to worry about losing his money. Now, even though I had a history of, fronting him all kinds of tournament buy-ins, it probably adds up to like 15,000. I was still operating in a situation where I didn't have a lot of comfort, and so I didn't want to make myself additionally uncomfortable by having to worry about whether or not I was going to lose his $1,600. And as fate would have it, I did get that 1600 back pretty quickly. Within, I believe, 7 or 8 weeks, I had brought the account up to 3400, and it was at that time that I decided that I wanted to withdraw that 1600 and pay him off completely. And so that's exactly what we did. With our setup, it was easy to trade money back and forth between us, and so I just transferred the 1600 over to his account. And it was at that time that I really started getting pretty aggressive in asking if I could rent his setup off him. What I wanted him to do is to tell me when he planned on taking days off, which he took a lot of, and then I would go over to his house and use his setup, his physical setup, and really get accustomed with the hotkeys and gain the experience that I really felt I needed. And he did resist for a little while, but he eventually broke down, and we made an arrangement where I got pretty much what I just described. And so finally I was able to get my first exposure to advanced hotkeys. And even though I could only trade maybe 1 or 3 days a week, I found that everything was a lot better in this situation, and my results just skyrocketed from there. And so under this new arrangement, the account lasted about 4 months, somewhere around 4 months. And from that point on, once I had access to the platform, and once I was able to actually perform the actions myself, and once I got comfortable with it, my results basically, I entered a period of just never looking back. But a really important point about how I managed this bankroll is that I was constantly taking money out of it. I would have like a plus $800 week, and then I would take 400 out and I would use it for my expenses, like my personal expenses to pay for food and things like this. And I only stopped pulling money out consistently like that, I think maybe 4 or 5 weeks before we closed the account. And so there was only about 4 or 5 weeks where I really was able to grow the balance and take bigger and bigger positions. For the majority of this account, almost probably close to like 85-90% of the time that this account was open, my balance was 2,000 or less. And even at the peak, at the time that we closed it, I think it was 5,300 USD that we had at the time that we closed it. And I really do think it's worth a mention to say that John had been urging me the whole time not to take money out of my balance. He was like, you have to get up and allow yourself to make more. And of course, like, this isn't a new concept to me, but at the time I felt that I really need to buy myself more time to study. And the only way I wanted to study or do anything is by devoting 100% of myself to it. And in order to do that, I couldn't have a job. And so when I saw an opportunity to make a couple of $100 here and there and be able to pay my expenses, I took it. And so it was only once I became comfortable in the expenses area that I started letting it ride and building the account. Now, unfortunately for both of us, John encountered some personal issues, some marital issues, which caused him to want to disband the agreement that we had. And so even though I was doing well and I was finally building a balance that could see me go pro, I had all of that cut short when he decided to kind of merge his finances and, kind of pull back from all the things that he was doing on a sort of a freelance basis. And my trading account was one of those things. And so I didn't have a say in the matter. It was strictly a case of, this has to end now. And, here's your portion, here's my portion, and, good luck. Now, due to a few problems in record keeping that I can never fix, I don't have bankable, trustworthy figures as to how much we exactly made in this account, but I can estimate it pretty closely. And in this case, with the 1600 USD I started with, I estimate that we pulled out approximately $15,700, and that includes the 1600. So together we made a gross amount of about 14,000, which means I got to keep approximately 7. So overall, we made close to 1,000% return, or up 900 on the account. And that's why you'll often hear me refer to this result as plus 450 or plus 500, because I don't really consider his share to be part of my gains. I see it as I made 7,000 on a $1,600 balance, even though that's not technically the case. So I've thought a lot about this account, as you'll learn in the next video when I recap my second live account, is that in this one I was extremely aggressive with the use of margin. Around this time I was also watching Ross Cameron from Warrior Trading build up an account from 500, and he was in the early stages of doing that, and he was really being very aggressive with his margin use. And I thought, at that time I was still pretty new, and I wanted to emulate the person that I saw having the most success, and that was Ross. And so I think I was a little bit naive in my margin use in that it was extremely aggressive. Things could have gone wrong. And even though I do remember being pretty patient and choosing the setups wisely, I definitely remember that I think my average position size was something like 3.5 times my balance. So I would be taking like a $6,500 position on a balance of say 1,800 or 2,000. And no doubt that is a very aggressive approach, and it's one which I have not repeated since. And one last note that I want to throw in this video is that throughout the entirety of this account, I was using live stop orders. So that's pretty much the brief summary of my first live account. That's how it went. That's how it ended. We dissolved that partnership and went our separate ways. But this is not the whole story. This is only one piece of it, and it's probably the least important piece. And so be sure to check out the next video where I recap my second live account, which is also known as TFG01. That's the one that triggered me to go back to the simulator, and that's a big part of the reason why I launched the YouTube channel. So if you're having a hard time understanding what I'm doing with the channel right now, be sure to check out the next video on my second live account.